Hello again, and welcome back to the Pregame Network podcast. This is episode 48. This is Dan again with my bestest pal, Anthony, and we're going to talk about even more video game shit. I have a decent amount to talk about this week,
Yeah,
or like an okay amount, but definitely more than last week.
yeah. I
Um,
have a few things. One of them is obviously like the big thing of the week. And
yeah,
I won't say I have too much, but I do have a lot to say about the few things that I have, and we'll see
mm,
what happens with that.
yeah. I don't have like one single big thing that I'm like looking at this week, but it's a lot of stuff that's like involved with the different games that I am following. But Anthony, what have you been playing this week?
So I'm still working my way through Monster Hunter 1. I haven't really slowed down. I've just been keeping a nice, even pace, taking it as I will, take it as I go, enjoying it for what it is. Still not much to say. I'm just enjoying it. It's a nice older game that,
Yeah.
just, I've already sung its praises a little bit, but, I've been enjoying it. I out of the blue, I took a look at Game Pass and I saw that Mullet Mad Jack was on there, so I gave that a shot.
Yep.
Yeah.
Did you like it?
So I enjoy it for what it is. Obviously, you know how I am with roguelikes, but I thought it was fun, entertaining. I think it's a little grating with like the tropes that it like puts in your face with like the streamer stuff, and it's obviously like it has it's I wouldn't even say it has like anime inspired things, but it's almost like someone was inspired by somebody being inspired by anime, and that's where like all the it has like that base like
Yeah.
understanding of it, and it's kind of like splattered in there, and it gets a little obnoxious sometimes. The one thing I will say about like the game, whether it's the tone, the setting, the gameplay itself, that game is held together by its pacing. And what I mean by that is obviously pacing is a big thing for me, but with this, it's like if it was any slower, all of its flaws and aesthetic would be unbearable, because as it is,
Yeah.
it is just by the seat of your pants. Occasionally you'll get like the story bits like in between, the fast-paced gunplay. The whole gimmick is like 10 seconds until you die unless you keep killing people. It's almost like a Crank kind of situation, right?
Yeah.
You've played it obviously, and it's just like,
I didn't play it that much. I played like I would say about 2 to 3 hours worth. Like enough that 2 to 3 hours, I feel like you play that game and you get everything that you need to get out of that experience. Like it's not something that I'm going to sit there for hours on end and play.
yeah, I will say that I was surprised at like the kind of interludes, like when you reach a watermark like over 10 floors or whatever. There's like a little segment where things slow down a little bit. I'm like, oh, this is nice. I wasn't expecting that. It kind of gives you some story, but when it tries too hard to give you story, it's like it's trying to tell a message. It's trying to give you a message that like it's just going to be, when I have that message in full, it is going to annoy me. I'm already like
Oh,
there was one segment where this guy just went on a whole diatribe. I'm just like, all right, stop. Enough. I get
yeah, I
it.
didn't get that far.
Yeah, I mean, you would likely, as a whole package, probably get more out of it than me, but it's fine for what it is. It's definitely like it's. How many roguelike boomer shooters are there in existence? Not many, I don't think. Is this the
Boomer
one?
shooters, I no, it's definitely not the one, but there's definitely some out there. There's a game that's coming out called uh Deadlight Rogue or Dead Zone Rogue. I
Okay.
would I don't know if I would classify that as boomer shooter, but that's a roguelite. Dead Link, which I think I talked about last week, I've been playing more of. I would consider Dead Link more of like a boomer shooter than I guess like a modern shooter. But I don't know. As far as like what falls into the roguelike category, I couldn't really tell you.
Okay. No, but overall, that's pretty much my opinion on it. As far as Mole Magic, I'll probably. I mean, it's small enough that I could probably beat it. We'll see what happens.
Yeah.
It is fun for what it is. The last game I played, just because like for the pregame network plays, me, Luke, and Harrison were playing the different Kingdom Hearts games, right? And I just
Okay.
we wrapped up Kingdom Hearts 2, and we've moved on to God Hand. That's something that we're playing now. But after we wrapped up Kingdom Hearts 2, I'm just like, man, I fucking love these games, the Kingdom Hearts games. Say what you will, everybody has a different love threshold for like what the Disney Final Fantasy stuff, and whether it's cringe or not. It's like whatever. But I went
Kingdom
and
Hearts 2 was an all-timer. That game was
yeah,
is fantastic.
yeah. So I immediately went back and I played Kingdom Hearts 1, Final Mix, the expanded version, and then the version they included with the the HD collection, which is, if you don't know, the games we got here were like the base vanilla versions of the game, right? In Japan, they had gotten what was called Final Mix, where they added some additional cutscenes, some additional content to fight against. Kingdom Hearts 2 in particular got a shit ton of content in its Final Mix, but the whole point is they retuned some things, they balance it, they add abilities, they add things to unlock. It's like the super version, so to speak, right? And those are the versions that are included with the HD remaster. And I think this is only my second time playing Final Mix. I have more experience with the vanilla version, but at the end of the day, it's pretty much the same as far as story progression. And I'm just sitting there, I'm just like, you know what, I'll play it. I decided to play it on the hardest difficulty. They call it Proud Mode. I forgot how hard and unforgiving it is. Like, everything does like twice as much damage, and you know, there's just there's like a few other balance tweaks that make it more difficult. I always get fucked up in my mind because Proud is the hardest difficulty in Kingdom Hearts 1. In Kingdom Hearts 2, they added another mode called Critical, and I'm just like, I'm not playing on Critical, everything's gonna be fine. And then like it just kicked my ass for like the first couple portions. But I've played pretty much all the way through it. I'm trying to do a 100% run of the first one. I don't know if I'll fully make it because synthesizing all the shit is a pain in the ass, but I just gotta say, it's a classic game. There's not much I can really say about it. It is, I've said it before, probably on this podcast, I'm gonna say it again whenever I'm describing the game. It is like, if you wanted a Disney video game, there it is. And I'm not just talking with like, oh, there's Disney characters in it. It's just like, they like the type of story they tell is like a Disney film of that time would tell, you know? So and it's got that solid action RPG gameplay. Obviously it's not as actiony as 2. Some people refer to Kingdom Hearts 2 as the best action game ever made, or one of the best action games ever made. Kingdom Hearts 1 is a bit different with the gameplay, where it's a bit more grounded, it's a bit more heavy. But I love it. I'm probably gonna end up doing at least 99%, I guess, however close I'll get to it, until I can't stomach the synthesis anymore. But
it's been at least a decade since I played through any Kingdom Hearts game. It's been a long fucking time.
Yeah,
I probably should go back and play.
It's worth replaying, just because, like, I mean, here's the thing, like, and this just goes with everybody. Like I said, there's a certain tone and atmosphere and disbelief that you got to have going into it. Like, whether it's a game you played in the past or a game you played in the future, I think, like, you'll probably, given how much children's shows you need to like put up with nowadays, you'll probably have like a bit more tolerance than you would have if you went for it like 5 or 6 years ago, however long ago. But here's the, like I always say, it's like, if you can't get past that, like, and this is a general thing, not a you, it's just like, you don't need to like harp on it. Just like, it's not for you. You're gonna miss out on something, because like there are moments that make you wince or cringe, but it's a Disney film. It is only as tolerable. Your tolerance for Kingdom Hearts will only go as far as your tolerance for like Disney films, or, you know, Disney films with sprinkling of like anime tropes in there, you know.
My tolerance for Disney films and like children's shows is pretty fucking high right now, considering the fact that I've got 2 very young children. So like, but I've always loved Kingdom Hearts, so it's like that's not really a chore for me.
Yeah. I'm just saying, like, you would have a different view of it going back to, because it is a game that you played. I'm just talking in general, because there's just like a stigma around it, and it's like maybe I'm like fucking retarded or something, but it's like those kind of hurdles were just never there for me. It's like, if something's good, it's good. I don't care if it's like if Mickey Mouse shows up at the ends and you're just like, oh, this game is terrible because Mickey Mouse showed up. It's just like, if that's like your view on it, like, I don't know what to tell you. So it's like, you get what you get. I have more complaints about how they handle Final Fantasy characters, but like that's a whole other conversation. But yeah, that's pretty much all I've been playing. I have a feeling next week I'll be like, I ended up 100% in Kingdom Hearts and I'm still playing Monster Hunter. That's probably where I'm going to be at.
Well, as far as I go, I've still been making my way through Mass Effect 3. I have hit the Leviathan DLC, and I mean, like, I've got nothing negative to say about Mass Effect 3. Like, I love all 3 games, and it's just been a good time going back to it. Like, there's really nothing much more I could say about that. It's been like 3 weeks now that I've been talking about Mass Effect, so I'm just gonna leave it at the fact that I'm still playing through Mass Effect 3. Like Mass Effect 2, I have been taking my sweet time with it, just like having fun exploring the universe and just doing everything in the game. So like, I'm in no rush to finish that game. So I'll finish it when I finish it, but I've been playing that passively in my free time. I've played like a couple matches of Space Marine 2, so that's not really like anything to write home about. Deep
Mm.
Rock Survivor is still a staple for me right now. Uh,
Mm.
it's still technically in early access, and they are still going to be adding a lot more stuff, but it is the only survivor game or auto shooter game that I really have sunk my teeth into. It's such a good version of that genre. um and like the the mechanics are deeper than people would give it credit for, I think. So like you really got to prioritize what you take as far as upgrades. Like you can go through mastery missions, and they added a new currency. There's a lot more to it
Okay.
than like surface level. So I really do love that game. And then the other game that has been just really got its hooks in me lately is the finals. And I'm gonna use this block as like yes, I've been playing the finals this past week, but I also want to talk about like what that game is at a core level. So I have been
Go
playing the
for it.
finals a lot. I've sunk like close to 20 hours in over the past week and a half, which is a lot for me. And it just it for right now for me it has not been getting old.
Mhm.
And I guess I'll just segue into my spiel about like this game at a core foundational level. I am of the opinion that the finals is the only free to play uh multiplayer. I'm not even gonna put it into another genre beyond multiplayer. Like it's obviously not a looter, it's not an RPG, it's not an MMO. Like it's not all any of these different things. It's just an arena shooter, but it's also a free to play, and that like you can put the free to play title into so many different buckets. But I think it's the only free to play game that isn't total slop. And like I've played Fragpunk very recently. I guess you might be able to consider Destiny 2 a free to play game since technically the base level is free to play, but you still need
Mhm.
to buy into like the game.
Yeah.
You have to pay to play the raids in the dungeons. You got to pay to do certain seasonal content. You have to pay to do a whole bunch of shit. So I don't really consider Destiny 2 free to play. Um, like Marvel Rivals is just a clone of a different game, which is fine.
Yeah.
Got it. But so uh, other free-to-play games are kind of escaping me right now. But the finals is so let me take a step back. It's made by the same people who basically did all of the really good Battlefield games, and
Yes.
it shows. Like you could see it in its moment-to-moment gameplay. The guns, the gunplay is extremely good for any video game. Like any game would be uh fortunate to have the gunplay mechanics that the finals does. The animations and the mechanics of everything are very, very smooth. Uh, the game modes themselves, they've gotten better over time. It really wasn't that great when it first launched, but they just added a permanent team deathmatch mode with season 6, and the power shift game mode, which we actually were just playing, is by far my favorite
Yes.
game mode.
That's
And
the way to
that's
play it, as
yeah,
far as I'm
100%.
concerned.
Yeah, and it's solely because of the quality of destruction in this game. Now, we just played it, so like it's very fresh in both of our minds. And you made a comment earlier during our play session about Battlefield and Battlefield 6, which is really right around the corner right now. And what did you say? What was your takeaway? Um, like when I said something about the destruction, what did you tell me?
Oh, I had said that this Battlefield cannot go beneath this level of destruction that we were seeing in the finals. Like that should be like the
Yeah.
bare minimum that they offer.
Yes. Yeah. And I don't think you could be any more correct on that statement. Like the finals, in my opinion, is one of the most underrated games that is on the market right now.
Hmm.
And it's for a multitude of reasons, but I think one of the biggest reasons is the level and the complexity of the destruction in this game. And the way that they make this work, and I'm not a game developer, so I only know so much about what I'm talking about, but from what I understand, all the destruction is handled on the back end server side from Embark, and it's pushed out in a way that it's synchronized for every player in the match. So like when you blow up a building or blow a hole in a building, it looks the same for everybody, as it obviously should. But it's all handled on remote servers that are doing all the heavy lifting and the computing for this destruction.
Mm-hmm.
And it's it's been about a year since launch, like maybe a little over a year, but the game is in such a different state than it was when it first launched. There's no bugs. It runs very smooth. I have not had a crash, I think, ever since I started playing again, like this past
Mm-hmm.
week. And I've put in just about 15 hours. It is and it's very addicting. God, it hooks in me really, really good.
Mm-hmm.
They just released new weapons, a new map. They retooled a bunch of the existing maps for the Power Shift game mode and the Team Deathmatch game mode, and
Mm-hmm.
it shows. And it's just a lot of fun. And I don't think that this game gets the credit and the recognition that it deserves because no other shooter on on the market right now could even come close to the finals quality of destruction and like destruction and gunplay together. Like
Yeah,
it really the asymmetry of every game, you obviously like no two games are going to go the same way.
of course.
So it's a really competent product. I think that the devs have something very special on their hands.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, like the Battlefield 6 has to have the finals level of destruction at the bare minimum. If it
Yeah.
doesn't, then like what are they even doing?
Yeah. No, yeah. That's a pretty good way to sum up the finals. I think a lot of its issues, or like, not issues like glaringly, but like the reasons it hasn't necessarily gotten it's the credit it deserves for what it offers of just being a fun game is I do think there are some things lacking as far as content is concerned. That's kind of, just how it's going to go with a free to play game. I also think that it's not a very visually appealing game, and I think that goes a long way when it comes to trying to net a wider audience in an actual natural way that isn't just like selling out all of your core gameplay tenants, to net a wider audience. But if you want like to catch like people and just like to get them to at least try it, you need to have some kind of visual appeal, and I think it is very bland. Don't get me wrong, I think that it is like a step above other games in the space that have that realistic art style. There's color in there, I think it's more
Yeah.
I think
Very
it's more.
mirrors edgy, if that
Yeah,
makes
like
sense.
like there are a lot of games out there where I can say like, okay, they tried to play it safe. The finals, it just feels like it's almost like they took like traditional AAA kind of, like with the mystery meat humans and the kind of real the kind of the real looking, environments, and the wacky cosmetics, and they just said we need to splash some color on it, and that was as far as they went, which,
Mm.
I'm not going to say they need to like upend it and cell shade it and choose a different style, but I am saying that is definitely a factor in why it isn't getting the attention it deserves, because the gameplay is not the problem. Like there are some small issues that I could see people having with the gameplay, but it's just a fun time. You can play it and
Yeah.
walk away having fun.
Which
I
is
in the
more than what can be said for a lot of the offerings out there today.
Yeah, in the process of getting Luke's attention to try and get him to play, like, it's actually funny. Like, I asked him, and he's just like, "Oh, you want to play them?" Like, what the fuck? He's just like, his complaint was that everybody is too spongy, like they take too much damage. And I could see why that. I can
Yeah,
see where he's
I
coming
can
from.
understand that.
Yeah, but like, here's the thing: like, it works for the finals. Like, you don't really want a hyper low time to kill with the finals, because imagine if you
Right.
had like Modern Warfare 2019 TTK with like everything else in the finals being the same. Like, it would be miserable. Like, you wouldn't be able to do half the shit that you do in that game, because it would be constantly
Mhm.
like you'd have douchebags like me throwing explosives everywhere to one hit you. You'd have the snipers just never leaving those high spots and just getting kills all the time. I think the high time to kill, at least for the medium and the heavy, makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's
It's actually one of the few games that I actually like a high time to kill. So
yeah,
that
no, that's what I'm
definitely
saying.
works in
It
its
works
favor.
for that. Yeah, it works for that.
Yeah.
Like, if you just had a battlefield and that was the time to kill, I'd be like, I don't know if that works for a battlefield, really.
Right.
I don't know, but
Yeah.
as is, seems fun to me.
Yeah. So that's basically all I've been playing this week. So to move on to get into the first news story proper, the first thing that I want to talk about that I found
Yeah.
is kind of funny, but also not really.
Okay. Okay.
Um, so Amazon is making a God of War TV show, right? Like this was
Yes.
confirmed. It's in
Hmm.
development. Blah blah blah. The showrunner, his name is Ronald D. Moore, said that he just can't play the games. Like he's not good at video games, which is whatever, but he just doesn't has no interest in playing the source material. So like, what the fuck? Where is this gonna go? Like I can't see a bright future for this show at all, full stop. Like it's
Uh,
just not gonna go good. That and it's just absolutely ridiculous to me that they put people like this in charge of these shows that have no interest, desire, or obligation to go back to the source material. Like the same thing happened with the Halo TV show, and look how that turned out. It's just
yeah.
terrible.
It's I don't know, like it's tough because when it comes to video games, especially something like a God of War. By the way, just as clarification, was this like the newer God of War games, all the God of War games? Was there a clarification? Like, what was it?
It was really more of a question of this individual's ability to play the game itself.
So any of the
Let's see.
games, he wouldn't like. It doesn't matter
Yeah,
which. Okay. So
yeah.
what I would
Yeah,
say,
say your piece. I'm gonna find the exact reason.
yeah, my whole thing when it comes to that is that it's really tough because like a lot of these games aren't like the hardest games around, right? I know like Dead Rising as an example is hard to get into. Dark Souls is hard to get into. Uh, Lengthy games like Persona is hard to like kind of like do like your due diligence to just go in and play a bunch of the games, right? I get it to a certain degree, but I feel like if you are like taking a series and adapting it, you should have some kind of bare minimum knowledge. As far as like God of War is concerned, every single one of those games is easy to get into and play, especially the
So
newer
let
ones,
me
you know?
stop you. Let me stop you right there because I
Yeah.
found the snippet that I was looking for.
Yeah.
Um, so this little blurb of the article reads as follows: Having not played video games since arcades in the 80s, the whole property is new territory for him. He admits trying out God of War, but found the quick-fire action stylings of Kratos and his crusade against other mythical beings to have a harsh learning curve. Quote, the controllers now, dot, 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 he laughs. Press R1. Which one's R1? Oh, I'm dead. I can't quite get a hold of that. Like, are you fucking kidding me?
Ooh, that's a bit
Yeah,
rough. I mean, like,
yeah,
I know that some people just aren't going to be able to get it, but like that raises questions. It's like I could give you the leniency. Like, let's say I wanted to be really lenient, and I said, okay, but you need to like do a lot of research. You need to have somebody play it in front of you, maybe. But at the same time, it's like maybe you're just not the man for the job because if you can't
mm,
play the games, that means that you didn't go to the games, enjoy yourself, and say, oh, I need to adapt this. It's just like you're just the guy, you know. So
right.
it's like I don't know. I feel like that should be a non-starter when the people in charge don't aren't getting involved with the game. You know, it's one thing if it's like an actor, right? And it's
Yeah.
another if it's people directing or writing or publishing or any of that. You know, I feel like there needs to be a baseline there, and they're just not respecting it.
No, they're definitely not, and it's gonna show once the show comes out. And it's a shame too because like the actual story of God of War, even though it's like this high octane action game, the
Hmm.
story is very good, and it's well laid out in all three games. And then the new God of Wars, or I guess 2016 God of War, that
2018.
was 2018. That was fucking incredible. I loved 2018 God of War. Um, and it's just and that had an equally fantastic story. Like it's just not going to go well for this show.
Yeah,
So
no,
I don't know. I don't really
that's
have much
that's
to
a
say
non-starter
beyond
for
that.
me. I mean, I wasn't really in the market for a God of War TV series. Like, I can't imagine the action in the show living up to the action of the game in any way. Like, I just yeah, you remember a while ago we talked about like we talked about how Sifu was getting a movie, And I'm just like, okay, you can hand it, like, it's sparse enough that you could just hand it off to the right guy and you could probably get something halfway decent out of it, even though you still need to respect it. God of War is not like, there's a complexity in the saga that led up to where it currently is, tied with such a great level of interactivity. Even though, like, the newer ones, there's a lot of more walking and talking, even those games have a certain level of interactivity that, like, a movie just does not have, you know? But those first, the trilogy in particular that led up to it and all the side games that led up to it, there's only so many ways we can say that's not a good sign. You know, it's kind of just a thing that has been going on for as long as, you know, we've been around. You know, wrong people, wrong place, getting handed the wrong projects for them. So that's worrying.
It's not a good look. Not a good look. So, I mean, that show comes out whenever it comes out, and I'll watch it just to see how it is, but I have no faith. So, moving on.
Yeah, moving on from that.
Yeah. Do you have anything small to touch on? Because I have a couple articles that I got to get to, but
we can we'll get to some of the small stuff before we tackle the big stuff.
Right.
So you had brought this up. I think I heard it first from you, or that you linking the article. The Saber Interactive CEO and his comments on Saints Row.
Yeah, that's actually what I was going to bring up. So perfect.
Yeah. So let me just the quote that people are throwing around is, what is it specifically? It's like
They didn't
Saints
know
Row
what they were
had
building.
no is they're running with the headline of Saints Row had to die, right?
Yeah.
And that seems pretty bad. Like, you really, like, that's kind of like that's a quote of somebody who doesn't necessarily know what they're talking about. But if you read a bit further, you get a bit more of the comment. And he said, specifically, they needed to die. They were so expensive for what they were. They didn't know what they were building. They didn't have any real direction. It couldn't last. And so who's going to fund them for the next game and after that disaster? That kind of makes more sense for Saints Row, right? But he also said something that I thought wasn't all that great. What was he? He said something like, you can't just throw money at the GTA of the worlds anymore, or something like that. Yeah, I would say so. There's a few things. Number one, it's like, if you solve that first problem of them not knowing what they're building, you immediately can throw money at it. The issue with the Saints Row reboot had a few issues. First of all, is like, it's new people were in charge of that game. Whoever was around for the full series was not like helming this game, or had lost their minds over the last couple of years, or like everybody else does. Like, the shift in tone and like the overall like types of characters and story that were in there, it's just like they were marketing it towards that modern audience that just doesn't exist. It was not the same style and tone. Like, don't get me wrong, Saints Row, the style and tone has been evolving to be more goofy since the first one. First two were kind of more. The first one in particular was very down to earth. The second one was still somewhat down to earth, and it had like a really good story that kind of grounded it, even though it was a little kooky. And then 3 and 4 and Get Out of Hell all went off the rails, right? This new one is just, it's almost like it had like sitcom level writing. Like, it had all the quirky hipster people as like gangsters. Is like, it did not feel like a Saints Row game. From the gameplay perspective, it was recycling as much as it could, but it was still somehow worse than the previous games. The AI in a lot of cases just didn't work. The driving mechanics weren't functional, and the weight was all scuffed, so you couldn't, like, it wasn't fun to drive, and how the cars functioned didn't work properly. The gunplay sucked. All the little gimmicks that people love, like the executions and the wild melee attacks you could do, were they were in far fewer numbers, and what ones were there were recycled from previous games. Saints Row was a mess, and whenever you pointed out whether it was a mess or not, like, people were saying like, oh, you know, this game doesn't look too great, it looks like you guys lost the plot. The social media accounts for Saints Row would argue with fans. That's part of the reason. Like, all of that coupled together is why it died and needed to die. It wasn't just like, my takeaway from the Saber CEO's language on this is that it's not just like him pointing to the things that needed to be criticized, right? Which there was plenty. It was very much just corporate speak, like, you know, that like, you just can't throw money at these projects anymore, right? It strikes me like the part where he goes like, they didn't know what they were doing. It honestly sounds to me that he just accidentally said that. I don't think he has a firm grasp on this situation. I think he's just as like, head up his ass as a lot of the other CEOs are that make all the bad decisions. So that's really all I had to say about that. It was like Saints Row was not a failure because it tried to tackle a particular genre, or that you just can't make certain games anymore. Saints Row failed because it was a piece of shit, and the people involved in creating it were constantly fighting with fans online. They made a product that nobody wanted for people that didn't exist, and the little goodwill they had, given how long Saints Row it had been since the last Saints Row game, they lost it online arguing with people. So you could, I mean, as far as the throwing money at the GTAs of the now, it's like you have like one GTA-like game. It's called GTA, and it comes out like once every 6 years or so. So there's a market. There's a market for GTA games because the guys making the GTA games take forever to make their GTA games. So that was my. I didn't know if you had anything else to say on that. That's my.
I mean,
take
that
on
pretty
it.
much sums it up. I mean, I think it just kind of goes more with the narrative of like, you're just, like you said, you're making a product that nobody wants for people that don't exist.
Yeah.
So it was gonna die inevitably anyway. Like, there's really not much more to say on that.
Yeah.
You actually kind of summed up my own thoughts rather perfectly. I didn't even know that the people running the Twitter accounts for Volition were arguing with were arguing with fans online. Like, that's never a good look.
Yeah, it was basically like there were worse examples of social media accounts of games and IPs arguing with people online, right? There's been worse. Like there was, I forget which racing game it was, like one racing game in particular, it was Need for Speed, maybe, with the word or hot. I don't know. There's some
I
recent
don't know.
some racing game in the last 2 or 3 years had like this one guy just heckling the account, right? And at a certain point, like he's like, "Oh, you could try it in 3 days," and like the guy's just like, oh, "I'm not trying this shit; it's garbage." And like whoever was in charge of the media account like wrote like a paragraph lashing out the guy as if he was just like another guy behind the computer. Like imagine like breaking full character and just having an emotional argument on the social media account. That's basically what happened. There's been worse examples, right? But the Saint, like
Yeah.
they were consistent. The Saints Row guys were consistent in saying like responding with meme images too. It's just like, hey, I've been a long time fan. This game doesn't look up to snuff. You guys need to make a lot of improvements. And then like they would respond with like a meme image of GIF of the game which was in development at the time. It's like, oh, haters gonna hate. Like that's not the best way to go about it. And now Volition's gone. I'm pretty sure like they closed, right? Volition closed.
Yeah. They
Saints Row
shuttered.
is back on ice for probably indefinitely, unless somebody wants to pick it up again in like 10 years. That is a toxic IP now. That's just how it's going to be until something changes in like the cultural mind of the industry where it's like okay to try this again. That's just it's a dead toxic brand now. So good job.
Yeah. Another one fucking bites the dust.
Yep.
Something I actually wanted your thoughts, like, so shifting gears a little bit, something that I wanted your thoughts on, since you're a pretty big fan of Resident Evil, is that there was I don't know if it was a leak, but there was a report saying that Resident Evil 9 is going to be a big reinvention of the series on the same par as Resident Evil 4 and 7. And like, you're a much bigger Resident Evil fan than I am, even though I do love the games that I did play and that I did enjoy. I just wanted to know your thoughts on that.
So it's something I've heard too, and it's kind of like puzzled me in a way for a few reasons. My understanding is that it's supposedly still going to like take a lot of the story beats from 7 and 8 and kind of close out that chapter of the series, right?
Okay.
And my assumption was that it was going to be in first person. Like these things kind of come in threes. There's side games obviously, but you had Resident Evil 1 through 3 was fixed camera. You have Code Veronica, which is technically the fourth game, but like it's dynamic camera, whatever, that's different. Then you have 4 through 6, which are third person action games, and then you had 7 and 8, which are first person games. I thought they were going to take this opportunity to like kind of coast a little bit and just tell another good story in first person with Final Fantasy 9, Jesus, with Resident Evil 9. When we get close to 9, I just remember Final Fantasy because I love that game. But Resident Evil 9, I would assume that was going to be, this is going to be the last time they do first person, and then we're going to move on to something else. And I'm just thinking, I keep hearing reinvention. I'm just like, where can they really go with this? Obviously, there's more to a reinvention than just changing the camera angle, But it's like, you had fixed camera, you had first person, you have third person, where are you going to go next? My assumption is if it's not going straight first person again, which is possible they still could, is that they would take the third person gameplay of the remakes that they've been building up since Remake 2. It's like you had Remake 2 and it was a very basic third person shooter because, you know, that's kind of what it needed to be for survival horror. Then 3 comes along and they do their own version of the dodge, which was in the original Resident Evil 3, so that's acceptable. And then 4 came along and it's basically a whole other beast altogether, right? So I could see them taking what they learned from Remake 4, which was once again largely unnecessary, and kind of making like an iteration based on that. I just don't know what they could realistically do. Maybe, like, my first thought is like, oh, maybe it's a semi-open world. It's like, they kind of already did that like twice-ish, you know? I'm just like, so evolution is a loaded term, and I just don't know what to do with that with a series like Resident Evil, which has periodically evolved. You know, it's like every 3 games they try something different. So I don't know. I'm not entirely sure what it could do because I'm interested because Resident Evil has been in good graces since 7. I think there's a bit of fuckery in the background with some of the writers they got on board. Like they're the kind of guys that
Always
like write a story.
fuckery.
It's like, you know how it is with anything like, you know, Pride related. Like one of the writers is doing shit on fucking Instagram. He's talking about, he's like, oh, you know, I couldn't write it in the thing, but I always say this about this character and this character. I'm like, shut the fuck up. And I'm just, but it's like 7 and 8 were solid. 7 is very, very good. The remake of 2 is, you know, it's kind of inferior in a few ways, but it's still a very solid and scary experience. 3 is a fucking mess. 4 is very good, but also very, very unnecessary. So it's like hit or miss, but it's still like it's a solid clump of games, barring 3.
Yeah.
You know, so I am curious to see where they go with it with 9. I can't even begin to guess what they could really do as far as an evolution with the series, short of them doing like almost like a full open world, because everything we've heard about the setting kind of leads to that being a possibility. But we'll see what happens. I forget exactly when it was, but when they were doing some Dead Rising event for the deluxe remaster, like they had like the guy that's handling 9 show up, and he went like, I have great news, we're doing another entry in the Resident Evil series. I can't talk about it yet, but it's in development. I'm just like, all right, so I guess we're all steam ahead. This is supposedly, if the rumors are to be believed, the last Resident Evil in the clump of games that had started development with 7 and the remake of 2. So like this is going to be capping things off, I think, for the RE engine. I think once Resident Evil past 9, we're going to see games in the REX engine. So
Yeah.
It'll be, regardless of whether it ends up being that evolution that everybody seems to be claiming, it will be like the capping off point of this era of Resident Evil that kicked off in 2017. So
Yeah,
we'll see what happens.
probably. Yeah, just like I said, I just wanted your thoughts on that.
Yeah, there's not much to say just because it is all rumors at the end of the day. I honestly have more to say about another possible remake of Resident Evil 1, but I'm working on a video with that because I'm telling you, man, I fucking hate modern fans. They're begging for remakes of 1 and 0 and Code Veronica and 5, and I'm just like, maybe remake Code Veronica, but just stop. Like, relax, you know?
Yeah. All right, well, like I said, I just wanted your opinion on that because you are a much bigger Resident Evil fan than I am, and I saw this and I'm like, I just didn't really know what to think about it, so I just wanted to bounce that off of you.
That's perfectly fine, yeah.
Next one that I got is it's something super duper small, but the Saber CEO, he and I want to just highlight this because it's actually like a really positive story. The Saber CEO knew that he had like a hit on his hands because he played it for like 300 hours and loved every second of it, but even after it came out and it sold over 6 million copies, he said he was still surprised that it did as well as it did, and I just thought that was really cool because like the CEO of the publisher, or not the publisher, the developer is the CEO of the development company, played his own game for like that long and it was like, I really like it a lot, I think this is going to be good, but even though it did as well as it did, he was still like, oh shit, like this is okay, we have a hit on our hands.
Yeah.
I thought that
It's
was
it's
cool.
it's always interesting to hear those little stories about like people up at the top of the chain, like revisiting, like, oh, when I played this demo or this game for the first time when it was, and they get so jazzed up and excited about it. It's always interesting. There's a lot of stories like that throughout, like particularly the PlayStation 1's development history, where you can always find like CEOs or publishers saying like, oh, look how amazing this is, and then they get to it.
Yeah. Like I said, it was like a super small thing, but like one of the very few things that we talk about that's actually like a net positive. So I just wanted to
Yeah.
bring that up and highlight it because
Yeah.
I mean that's cool, man. And plus the game is fucking awesome. So I can't wait for Space Marine 3.
Yeah.
Um,
Good stuff.
let's see what else. Next thing that I got, Battlefield 6 has more play tests happening this week.
Mm,
But that was on March 21st, so they're probably going on like right now, which
probably. Yeah.
is a good thing because Battlefield 6 needs as many play tests as possible.
Yeah. And
It
that, I
needs to
mean,
be
that's
the
the whole.
most solid, put together, competent product that it can
Yeah.
be before that game launches.
Yeah, and
So
that's the
that's a
whole
plus.
point of Battlefield Labs. So it's like that should be happening. If
Yeah.
there's one thing to like, because they weren't really entirely clear on what Battlefield Labs was as far as different from just alpha and beta testing, which alpha and beta tests happen all the time. The whole point of Battlefield Labs is supposed to be just constant updates and a lot of feedback and constant testing. So I mean, this is a good kind of insight into the pacing of their testing periods and whatnot.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's see what else I got here. You know who Joseph Fares is?
Yes.
Uh, so I just think it's funny that he has been quoted saying like more than once that. Let me take a step back. So Joseph Fares is the guy behind It Takes Two, which won Game of the Year the year that it came, I think that was 2 years ago. It
Yeah.
was
Is it
that
Ferris or
co-op.
Ferrer? I can't
I think
remember.
it's Fares.
Okay.
Um, but so that game came out. It won Game of the Year, and then he went on to make Split Fiction, which just came out, and it's like getting phenomenal reviews right
Hmm.
now.
Hmm.
So he was quoted saying more than once, and it happened again because I'm bringing it up. But EA is a great company to work for, but nobody believes him. I just thought that was fucking hilarious.
Is he
Um,
joking or like what is that?
No, he was being totally honest. Like there was no sarcasm there, and like he's got this really bombastic and like flamboyant way of speaking,
Uh-huh.
but he's said consistently that he has a very good relationship with EA, and they're a great company to work for. So I don't know where the you know mistranslation is, or so I don't know. Like I said, I just thought that was funny. There's nothing more to that.
Hmm. That is pretty funny. That guy's always been like a, what would they call him in the industry? Like a firecracker. He always been,
Yeah,
yeah. As far as his
yeah,
personality and some of the stunts he pulled on the Game Awards and whatnot, that's always been
yeah.
his thing. So
Oh man, it's just fucking hilarious.
yeah,
Um, let's see. I'm kind of flying through these because I've just got so many different articles that I
there's a
linked
bunch
this
of
week.
small ones. Yeah,
Yeah,
keep
it's a
them
good
coming.
it's been a good week. Um, this was one is about Doom, the Dark Ages. So people have been calling the Dark Ages the woke ages because it has like a bunch of different difficulty sliders that you can adjust to tweak the game to how you want the experience to be.
Hmm.
And I mean, like, if you want it to be harder, then make it harder. Like, if you want to experience the story, then adjust the sliders accordingly.
Yeah.
It's just
So
fucking fans. I don't understand
so
it.
so so here's the thing. Like that's just kind of the unfortunate uh reality, so to speak, of like the things we've ranted about multiple times, where it's just like if you don't address these things properly, if you don't take care of them, things that aren't necessarily in that fit that definition or in that viewpoint, so to speak, of actually fitting the definition of being like for modern audiences, or as they say woke or whatever, right, will get
Mhm.
caught in the crossfire just because like it's not being the core issues that cause this are not being handled adequately. So that's just, you're going to end up with that, and it's only going to get louder and louder as time goes on, because the actual stuff that is getting away with it is just going to drag. It's like a singularity. Things are going to get dragged into it until like it's unbearable for the forces at play. But as far as that stuff itself, I'm more, I don't want to say concerned. I'm more hesitant for certain things that they're talking about with that Doom the Dark Ages, the different things, because it almost feels like you've heard me rant, not on the podcast, but in general, I've talked about accessibility and how that's kind of like just like a cover for making games easier. It kind of falls into that category. There's a certain degree of stuff I can understand. It's like, make your field of view wider, change certain, bump up the speed a little bit. Like, I feel like there should be a baseline that the game is designed around, right? That works for like most people. And then from there, you can make things more difficult or finely tune things that don't necessarily make things easier. I always hesitate when it comes to options that make things easier, because it like menus like that by default to me, like almost scream to me that like there's kind of not a flaw in their game design necessarily, because I haven't seen any gameplay that makes me think that about the Dark Ages, but like they're not, what's the word? They're not confident in their gameplay design almost, right? Like, I'm not saying that's like a conscious thing that they're making changes for, but I feel like like certain things, and maybe we'll talk more about it as we get closer to the Dark Ages as far as what exactly is on that menu, but I feel like a lot of those options go too far. It's almost like I've talked to you about it before, the complaints I had about specifically The Last of Us Part 2, which I shockingly have played. When I saw the accessibility menu, it was basically like reading a cheat menu, and I'm just like, there's kind of a blurring of the lines there, where I hate it when things are sold in a way that they aren't really. Like, you can tell me that, that's a graphic setting, and you can move that to a different menu that's like player experience or whatever, that makes sense, right? But when you start saying like, the parry window, you can make that 10 times longer, and you're listing that as accessibility, like, I just don't. That's where you start to lose me a little bit. So there's a whole conversation to be had about accessibility. It's not, as they say, woke, because that really, like, that falls into like, how the game, like, parts of the game that relate to story and atmosphere and character and how it treats you, the player, and how it adjusts things that have existed in the past. But there is like an underlying issue or concern there that could be talked about. But no, it's not quite the woke ages, as they say. There are things that fit that purpose.
Just a complete overreaction.
Yeah, and like I said, those overreactions are only going to get worse. This stuff's been bubbling up for 10 years, and like now that everything's out in the open and these people are still lying about it, people are just going to get caught in the crossfire, and that's one of the ways that happens.
Yeah, I just God, I already pre-ordered the collector's edition of Dark Ages because I am confident that it is going to make a really, really good product, and both Doom 2016 and Doom Eternal were fucking awesome, so I have no reason to doubt them.
Yeah.
Okay, the last thing that I'm going to bring up for my news cycle this week that I think that warrants talking about, the rest of the stuff, they're way smaller. I'm just going to save it for next week, but the last thing that I wanted to talk about is, so it is in the lens of Helldivers, but it doesn't necessarily relate directly to the game Helldivers. The developers went there were a couple articles written by PC Gamer, Games Radar, and I think that was it. But anyway, they were talking about how like you can't spend all your time balancing your game, and that the industry at large has got it backwards between the core fundamentals of what make a game great and like the profit aspect, or like sustaining or holding up a sustainable business model. And what was the other thing? And you need to start taking more risks. Like, those are the big three things that they were talking about this week. And I bring this up because I feel like that would resonate with you a lot. Which I agree with all of these things. Constant balance tweaks are a terrible idea because you're going to suck all the air out of the game. If you don't take a risk, you're never going to get a good reward. And if you don't focus on the fundamentals of what makes the game fun at a core foundational level, then you don't really have a game anyway. So I don't know. I just thought that it was really interesting that the Arrowhead had got three different articles written about them in the span of a couple days, and their game is still like the bar for co-op action games that are also live service
Yeah.
that's around today.
Yeah.
So that was my
Uh,
takeaway.
yeah, I mean, I will say it's easy. It's easy enough for him to say that now about the balancing. Now that he's actually, caved.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
his points
fair.
aren't wrong. You can't
Yeah,
hyper balance and hyper tune your games. There's a time and a place, and it's often like it's such a small fraction of the games and projects that come out that actually need that kind of balancing, that finely tuned balancing. But the
right.
like the second you start throwing multiplayer, be it PvE or PvP, it's better to kind of ease off the brakes, if not remove them altogether, because making things more usable, or buffing them up so they're stronger, or just focusing on fun and not so much like it's like either killing these enemies too quick, we gotta brain them in, or they're fighting other players too much, blah blah blah, just in general. Obviously there's no PvP in Helldivers, but it's something that not a lot, like, I'm glad he's saying it, but like he really needed to be corralled into that. Like how long were you and Joe talking about the balancing issues of this game?
Yeah, no, it was a while. It was way longer than it should have been. But you know what?
Yeah,
At least they made it to the other side of the tunnel,
it's
and
very true.
that was the takeaway. So like it could have
Yeah,
been worse.
yeah, yeah, of course.
Um,
I'm just, yeah, but he's got a good point.
yeah. So I mean, those are like I said, those are like the last three things that I really wanted to touch on because I feel like, especially in today's gaming landscape, like it's those 3 points are so valid and like right right on target.
Yeah,
So I don't know. I wanted to bring it up.
that's fine. Makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So that was pretty much the only thing, the only large big things that I wanted to talk about,
yeah,
things of note. Everything else is like super trivial, and I'm just gonna save it for next week.
yeah. I've got a few things to say for next week too, because there is obviously the big thing that we need to get to before we wrap today.
Go on.
And you know what it is, right?
Assassin's Creed
We
Shadows.
got to talk about Assassin's Creed Shadows. But Daniel, before we get to
Yes.
this topic, I would just like to ask you, even though I already really know, what your experience with the Assassin's Creed series is.
So I am an OG fan.
Hmm.
I guess I was an OG fan. Like I played Assassin's Creed from one, two, three, and Black Flag, right? That's my Assassin's Creed pedigree.
Hmm.
After Black Flag, when it started going into like the like RPG aspects of the game, that's when I dropped off. That's not why I'm not
Hmm.
looking to min-max my assassin. Like you could fuck off with that. Um, but I was a fan from day one, and then uh, Black Flag was the last one that I played. I'd never beat it, but I played it and I did enjoy it. And then after that, it was just too much too often, and I just stopped
Hmm.
playing. So
Okay.
that is my history with
Yes.
Assassin's Creed.
I will attest that, like you said, original fan isn't necessarily the best word, because we both kind of like dropped it off, but I can attest that you were there from the very beginning. The first time I ever played
Yep.
it, much like Dead Rising 1, was at your house. I even remember, I don't know if this was a collector's item, or if it was like something you got from like a GameStop, but I remember you had like this small box, like this well-built box with a handle in it, and it was Assassin's Creed thing. Was that part of the game? Do you even remember what the fuck I'm talking about?
That I know exactly what you're talking about, actually.
Yeah.
That was a carrying case for my PS3.
Oh, so it was like something you bought
Yeah,
from like a GameStop or something. It wasn't part of like a
I
collector's
bought it
edition
from Best
package.
Buy, and
Okay.
it was an Assassin's Creed branded carrying case.
Okay, because I that
Yeah.
always stuck out. It was probably at the foot of your bed or something. Because for some reason that was
Yep.
so that stuck out in my memory. But I
Shocked
always
that you
remember
remember that.
we were hanging out all the time back then. Some of that stuff sticks out, and not for nothing, I do have a better memory than you in a lot of.
No, I agree.
But anyway, so it's like I was much like you. I played the first one at your place, and also like another guy we knew had it. So it was one of those games I played by like borrowing or going to play people's houses, waiting till everyone else was asleep and playing it. I got 2, I got Brotherhood, I got Revelations, I got 3.
Oh, Brotherhood. That's the one I
Yes,
forgot. Brotherhood
yes.
was my favorite Assassin's Creed. I
Yeah.
fucking forgot it.
Brotherhood's a solid game. My only complaint about it is it really should have been a part of 2. 2 and Brotherhood should have been the same game, but that's a whole other conversation.
I agree. I
Um,
just really enjoyed the fact that you can manage your own guild of assassins and send
yeah,
them out and to do stuff.
yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. I just, like I said,
Yeah.
that's a whole other conversation about like my
Yeah, I
opinion on 2
agreed.
and Brotherhood together. But I didn't skip Black Flag, but I got to it late. I played Unity. That came. I think the graphics card I bought at the time came with Unity, and I ended up owning it that way. I tried Syndicate. I remember like a couple months ago, I said I was going to try and do Origins and Odyssey, and I just couldn't get through Origins with the RPG shit. Even Syndicate was hard
Hmm.
to get through. But yeah, so we've been there since the beginning, and we've played quite a few of them. And that's just where we were at, and we're kind of in that same boat where it's just like it once it went that just like we're gonna be yearly, we're gonna be RPGs, like that's kind of like we just checked out for good. It's like that's not what we were here for, as
Yeah,
well
it
as like
became the Call
the
of Duty of action games. I
pretty
just couldn't do it
much,
anymore.
yeah. It was very much by the formula. It was detached from the original story. Like the story was just like an afterthought. The modern story, that is. So it's like all the hooks were gone for us.
Yeah.
So as far as Shadows, our recording schedule placed us a little bit awkwardly pre-release. Like we missed out some stuff that built up. Even though we're in the perfect position to judge the early reception. The one thing I will say, just to get us started, is that Ubisoft, right as Shadows was hitting, adopted a similar policy to Square Enix, the one I brought up a few weeks ago, where they were ready to sue critics under the guise of protecting their
Oh,
employees.
Jesus.
Yeah, I like I said with the Square Enix thing, it's just like once they start doing that, like now that like critique and like complaints about all this shit is ramping up, they are going, like a lot of these companies are going to lawyer up under the guise of like protecting from like serious threats or racism and shit, like when it's
That's
really just about the
fucking
games getting
ridiculous.
worse. Yeah, so like expect more of that. I don't think it's going to like last in the long term, obviously, but this is going to be part of them putting up a fight to not be receptive to criticism and instead just double down on all this shit. But anyway, yeah, they got a team of lawyers on standby. I don't know if it got to any point with any major critics yet, but it's definitely a scare tactic that they're absolutely willing to push to an actual punishment if it came down to it. But for the game
Mhm.
itself, let's talk about it, and then we'll talk about why
So,
this turned into
hold on.
such a heated thing.
Before you get into it, what have you been hearing about like the reception of Shadows?
So it's very polarizing because on the one hand you have everybody with common sense who is at minimum talking about, like, if we'll get into the more controversial stuff later, but basically you have people just going, yeah, this is just another Assassin's Creed game. It's not worth all the headache and the hassle that was building it up to be. It's not the game that needs to it needs to be to save Ubisoft. It's just another by the numbers Assassin's Creed game, only now with a bunch of cultural baggage, and slightly better cutscenes. And what people are basically saying about it is that, like, it's by the numbers, it's not that great. Assassin's Creed, Ass Creed, it sucks, whatever. But on the flip side, like, you can tell they really went all out with like their behind the backroom deals, behind the scenes and stuff like that, because the influencer sphere is very loud and very positive about it, even though everything that they've shown so far is just not like money traded hands, money and goods traded hands at some point for a lot of these people. They in the month that they delayed, I would argue that in the month that they delayed the game the last time, right, that they spent more time and effort gearing up a marketing campaign than they did actually refining the game's edges.
Yeah,
Like,
I could
that's
totally
how
agree with that.
that's how crazy the positive insight is. It's like everybody's doing the same shit where it's like return to form, return to form, return to form. Like, return to what fucking form are you talking about? Assassin's Creed has been the same way for like a decade, and the one return to form game, so to speak, was Mirage, and people apparently didn't like that. It was still a shitty Assassin's.
No one liked it. Yeah.
There's no fucking return to form. Like, the return
Mirage
to form
was the one game that I was remotely interested in, and then it came out and I saw the reception. I was like, "Yep, I'm good." I
Yeah,
didn't
it's like
even fucking touch it.
I still forget that the game even fucking happened. Like, I'm just like, oh
Yeah.
yeah, it was Origins, Odyssey, Valhalla, right? No, Mirage is tucked in there. Like, everybody fucking forgot about it. It was a Mirage. It vanished. But yeah,
It's a
so
Mirage.
But that's what I've been hearing about the reception. I'm assuming you've heard much the same as far as
Yeah, I mean,
if
what
you've
I've
heard
heard is
anything.
like, oh, if you like the modern era Assassin's Creed games, this is just more of that. It doesn't do anything new, doesn't do anything like interesting. The writing is absolutely awful, but it's just another Assassin's Creed game. Like, yeah, like the world looks
No.
great, the graphics are good, but the end, like that's it.
Yeah, yeah.
The only thing that
Except
makes it special is the fact that it takes place in the feudal Japan.
yes, the only thing special on the outside of it is that like there's a bunch of cultural baggage with it, and Ubisoft really needs the game to do well considering the position they're in. I think
Right.
that's where most of the talk is coming from. But as far as like the game itself, as far as I can tell, it's what we just said. It's a serviceable ARPG Assassin's Creed, which is just not in everybody's wheelhouse. It's bland that way. It's got the same gameplay loops, which is a term I don't normally use. You know I hate the term gameplay loop, but it applies here because that's how they aim at these things with their design for Assassin's Creed. It's that formulaic. With the few, it's the same shit with a few new animations, so that people eating this up can say, "Nuh-uh, look at new thing in game. That therefore game is brand
Yep.
new." It's
It's
got
just paint by numbers.
Yep, it's got the same cheap gameplay oversights and bugs and glitches. It's the same slop you'd expect from another forgettable Assassin's Creed game, but with nicer looking cutscenes, a nice weather system, and overall a bunch of smaller changes that make it look like they want a bit of that Rockstar reputation, where it's just like, look at the attention to detail. I've seen so many people eat up the season thing. When don't get me wrong, that's neat. I like it when worlds change with the seasons. Not enough games do that, but it's not saving this game, right?
Absolutely not.
So we talked about the game. We talked about how people are talking about it, but let's just refresh real quick why this
Okay.
game is getting so much heat. We talked about it. Ubisoft really needs this game to do well because they are in a very, very bad position, right? For a year, cultural issues have been building up on this. Like you have all these things. You have Yasuke to begin with, being as important as he is in a historical context and as a playable character. You have you have all the shoehorned characters in there, like you have the female sumo wrestler and the non-binary ninja, and you have
I
all these
didn't
different
even
things.
know there was a female sumo wrestler and
There
a
is.
non-binary ninja.
And here's the thing: if you're telling a fictional story and doing your own thing, you can do whatever the fuck you want. Assassin's Creed still tries to play it both ways, where they're trying to say like we're historically accurate when it comes to the setting and the people, the historical figures that we use. That's always been their thing. Is like this needs to be accurate, in we kind of bend it around our story. But then you have these kinds of characters that go against all that. And here's the thing: there are female sumo wrestler characters. They exist. Yasuke, even though he was never a samurai, he was never this big historical figure, has been adapted into fictional pieces, and people have been fine with that. But it's because Assassin's Creed has this like claim, not just in like the series wide, because like for years they've been saying like, oh, it's a trip through history, that you're essentially getting to experience a unique story, but in this historical context, right? It's not even just that. It's the fact that they trotted out historians, alleged historians, to say like, oh, no, this is accurate and this is accurate. They're changing Wikipedia articles. They're writing smear pieces and all this kind of shit. And you know what's funny about this? The key guy they had in propping some of this stuff up, particularly Yasuke, is he has gone into hiding because this has basically ruined his reputation and outed him as a hack that basically had no idea what he was doing with history. He's been like wiped clean from the internet, right? It's crazy how deep this goes. Their main historical consultant is a woman whose claim to fame in the historical space is studying gay samurai and their relationships they had with young men. And I'm just like, this is your historical, like even if that's something you want to study, why is this your key and sole historical consultant for the game, right? And it's just to say that all of this baggage would not like be part of it if they were writing fiction, or if they were and not claiming the historical accuracy, and if they didn't put up such a fucking fight about it. Because the entire time it wasn't my bad, we got this wrong, we're gonna fix it. It was doubling down and telling everybody who is, as we talked about with Doom the Dark Age, people are just fed up with all this nonsense, so it's not cutting it anymore. It wasn't going to ground anymore. And
Yeah.
every step of the way, it's like it's gotten to the point where like the Japanese legislature has actually discussed this game because of all the shit you can do, which they find very offensive. Like you can desecrate Japanese shrines, which was patched out day one, by the way, just quietly. You know, you can't do that anymore. I guess it really does matter, you know, to them at this point. There's like, you know, they not only do they blow up Yasuke's part in Japanese history, but you can make him gay if you want. You can date members of Nobunaga's like family if you want. It's just all this weird shit. And I've seen some people call it a humiliation ritual for Japanese people and people who are into Japanese culture. And I'm just like, I wouldn't go that far as why it was written that way, but it certainly fell into that, you know. So basically, like the biggest reason this blew up is because it's a by the numbers Assassin's Creed game that needed to be more than Ubisoft was willing to actually make, that they just couldn't make, I would argue. And at the same time, they found themselves in a cultural whirlwind where people were saying, like, you're lying to us. They were saying, no, we're not lying to you. And it hit all the wrong cultural marks for them. But the flip side is you have all those people willing to defend the game no matter what, which is kind of where, you know, regardless of everything we just talked about, there are people out there who don't actually care about games as more than a toy, right? The kind of guys we talk about all the time that just buy or watch something, sometimes without ever finishing it, they lose interest, and from there they just forget about it. Those same people are lashing onto these cultural things as like some kind of like virtue signaling thing, and that's why it's as loud as it's gotten, basically. So you just have this nightmare scenario like building up around the game, and it's like all these dime a dozen gaming personalities, the kind you don't go looking for but can't avoid because they're propped up in front of general audiences, or they hit the algorithm just right. All of these people are the only ones saying anything positive, them and their orbiters. And then you have some of them are having mini meltdowns because like in the Twitch chat or whatever, they're aggravating these people. And that's where I'm just like, if you're the only people of note propping this up, if all these gaming industry outlets are like writing the same return to form, you know, Assassin's Creed is back, it's like goods and money definitely changed hands somewhere before this, right? And all it really was in service of was just another by-the-numbers Assassin's Creed. The PC numbers are higher than the last 3 Assassin's Creed right now. They're lower than recent failures. Like, it's not outdoing Veilguard on the PC, right? That's probably not a good sign. I will say Assassin's Creed had better legs on the console, so there's probably there. Assassin's Creed, the social accounts are saying 1 million players, 2 million players, and you'll notice, what's wrong with that figure, Dan?
That's just player engagement. It's not
exactly
people who bought the fucking game.
Exactly. And Ubisoft is one of those companies that has their own subscription service, which they've bragged about growing. So I'm going to say, like, of the 2 million players, I'm going to say at least 500,000 of those players, maybe even a little more than that, are from subscription services or like shared Steam family things, honestly. I don't see, like, the sales are definitely not where it's going to be. For where this game is going to end up. I do think it's going to probably do slightly better than Veilguard in the long run. I don't think it's going to be where Ubisoft needs it to be. I don't think it's where the shareholders are going to want it to be. I don't think it's going to be anything. Like, you have people inflating this. They're like, oh, it's historic numbers for Assassin's Creed. I'm like, compared to what? There are games in this series that have moved 11 million copies. And you're talking about, like, 2 million players being, like, a benchmark for you? Like, come on. And
yeah, it's not good. And this game is, this is gonna be the nail in the coffin that sinks Ubisoft. Like, probably 2 million players engaged is not the same thing as 2 million copies sold, obviously. And those are just not the numbers that this game needed to do. So it's just gonna go down.
And you know that if they had those sales, they'd be bragging about that and not players. They wouldn't be saying players. They would be, or at the very least, they would be doing like day one sales is this, players is this. Thanks for playing with us. But it's right now, it's just that front of false positivity and fluffing the numbers any way they can and hoping that the gaming industry outlets and all the influencers carry the water in the meantime. And the kind of the last thing I really want to say about it, aside from the fact that, you know, we just got to wait and see where the final numbers fall as far as them getting to somebody they can't lie to, like the shareholders. Did you hear about people arguing about the credits?
No.
Okay. So simply put, and this kind of highlights the stupidity of this whole conversation. The credits to Assassin's Creed Shadows are 2 hours long. Now,
Oh, I did hear about the
yes,
2 hour credit.
yes. Now, when I look at that, I see bloat. I think it points to the
Yep.
persistent issues we've talked about, where there's just way too many people involved in making these games, with the addition of something I like to bring up, which is that talent bleed has made the situation even worse, where companies need to outsource or hire 10 to 100 more employees to brute force something one talented individual could do. But people are trying to make it, it's just like, oh, you're saying the game's woke because it has 2 hour credits. I'm like, no, the game's a bloated sack of shit. You're trying to start some fucking bizarre culture argument. I'm just saying Assassin's Creed has sucked for a long time. This new one looks like it sucks. It's just now it's also dipping into cultural shit more than it has beforehand. And at the same time, you're hiring a bunch of Canadians and Indians to just brute force these games into being completed in service of trying to prop up a company that's been on the decline for a decade. The game's shit. It looks like shit. People who are saying it's good are fucking coping. People who are saying that it's some secret game of the year, you're fucking insane. It's crap that's highlighted by all the shit that built up to it. That's really it.
Yeah.
It wasn't hysterically bad for the people that wanted it to flop. It wasn't amazing, defy all expectations that like the weird people who are hanging on to this game wanted it to be, right? There are so many people online just going, oh, 2 million players. I bet you're. It's like the game is it's middling crap. You're
It's just another Assassin's Creed game. That's really all it comes down to.
That's exactly. That's all it is, and that's really all there
Yeah.
is to say about it. It's just like after all this waiting, it's just more by the numbers crap that isn't what it needed to be, and it has like bizarre people defending it because it happened to hit all the right cultural points. So
Yeah.
we just gotta wait for it to quietly die. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll see how that goes.
Yeah.
That was probably where we should stop it because
Yeah.
if fucking God, I can only take so much Assassin's Creed. Like,
Yeah. There's only so much to say about it. I mean,
yeah,
because like I said, it just turned out to be another crappy Assassin's Creed game. It just has bizarre, rabid people around it, and will.
that's all I was
for the month.
expecting from it too. To be honest, it was just
Yeah.
it was never going to be anything special.
Yeah, I was expecting just a middling Assassin's Creed and just a bunch of unnecessary crap around it. So technically, I got exactly what I wanted.
Yeah, well, hopefully Ubisoft finally goes down after this.
Yeah, we'll see what happens.
Yeah. Anyway, I think that will about do it for this episode. Yeah. Was said what 47?
48,
48.
I think.
48. Yes. So that was sorry to end it so abruptly, but that was yeah. Anyway, that was episode 48. We can go a little bit more into Assassin's Creed next week, but
Yeah, well, we'll touch on it because I'm sure there will be more things to talk about. Just because this is like that first week and a half, it's almost like a battlefield of information for the people fighting over it when it's hit certain audiences. But we'll touch on that and see how things have gone since then, and then we'll hit all the other shit and
yes, sir.
We'll go from there.
All right. Well, that was episode 48 of the Pregame Network podcast. If for anybody listening, thank you for listening, and we'll be back again next week. I mean, that was kind of an abrupt way to stop it, but I'm sure there's going to be more shit that comes out about Assassin's Creed that we're going to talk about. But as far as this episode goes, this is where we're going to end it.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, thank you for listening, and we will talk to everybody next week.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.